everyone, Macintosh here. In my previous videos covering the lore of New Eden, I touched on the topic of infomorphs, specifically capsuleers and war clones. In this video, I will be talking about the recent posts by CCP Games that expands on this topic. The involvement of the Deathless Circle, the Life Giver, the Quartermaster, and a Fifth Empire within New Eden. And finally, give my own honest opinion about the narrative. Before moving on, I recommend watching the last two videos covering the subject more extensively, as this will not make much sense to you if you're just learning about this right now. So let's get started. CCP Arcade made a 3-part post on the Vanguard Discord centered around a specific theme. Who are the Vanguard? Where did they come from? How did they come to be, and what does their existence mean to the future of New Eden? The posts are written like a short story. In the first part, the story begins with the past. The Vanguard are a new type of infomorph, whose past lives were as previous generation war clones fighting for clandestine organizations such as Aegis. Before that, as dust mercenaries fighting for the Four Empires. And before that still, a regular human being. As of today, the Vanguard work as freelancers for the Deathless Circle. In exchange, the Deathless offer benefits to these infomorphs. To put it more specifically, let me quote a paragraph directly from the post. Quote, "In exchange for assisting in the development of Vanguard war clones, you have been guaranteed sanctuary, work opportunities, and existential continuity unthreatened by the economic pressures and persecution that saw independent war clone organizations fail into irrelevance in the past. Your side of this agreement is fulfilled simply by participating in Vanguard deployment operations in any capacity. The diagnostic data you provide while inhabiting Vanguard blanks is invaluable to the Circle's ongoing research into Jovian biology and technology." End quote. The persecution is in reference to what happened to previous war clones when the Four Empires turned on them shortly after Dust 514. Again, these war clone infomorphs were either put into cold storage as digital imprints in vast databanks, or have been pressed back into action to work for the likes of Aegis, but on a short leash. The Sanctuary is essentially just another databank where the infomorphs can reside inside an abandoned outpost discovered by the Deathless Circle. The difference being that they are offered more freedom and independence than their previous masters. Or at least given a much longer leash this time. The first part ends by describing the nature of the new clones, or blanks as they will be referred to from here on out. Unlike the war clone blanks, Vanguard blanks utilize modified Jovian clone bodies stored inside the abandoned outpost that once belonged to the Jovian Directorate. More on them later. The Fulcrum is the name of the abandoned Jovian outpost, which is located within the system of Zarzak, a system that resides within a region of New Eden that was once inaccessible to anyone besides the Jove. The second part summarizes briefly how the old war clones and related infomorphs were developed. I have already covered this extensively in my previous videos. However, I did not go into specifics about the factions the infomorphs fled to for safety, largely because I did not know at the time and I wasn't sure I would be able to properly explain it then. But now that the second part has been posted by CCP Games, we finally have some level of clarity. The post mentions several factions by name. The Dreadgaristas, Angel Cartel, Mordu's Legion, and the Amar. Some of the infomorphs from within Mordu's Legion branched off to form Arcombine as a result of institutional disillusionment and their interest in Sleeper and Jovian tech. This interest led to the Arcombine forming a secret association with the Angel Cartel. In this search for Jovian ruins, the Arcombine's head clone physician and infomorph specialist, going by the name of Life Giver, made contact with those affiliated with the Deathless. This is where the Quartermaster comes into the picture. You may have heard me mention the Quartermaster in my previous video when I talked about the Valkyrie. He is a prolific engineer and technology dealer who has previously worked with the Valkyrie. Eventually, both Lifegiver and the Quartermaster were recruited into the Deathless Circle due to their talents and ideological alignments. Eventually, with these three parties working together, they were able to discover the Fulcrum. According to the post, the Fulcrum offered much more than anything the Archcombine, Lifegiver, the Quartermaster, and even the Deathless Circle had ever expected. Within the Continental megastructure, the following were discovered: a derelict onboard virtual reality space where the Infomorphs can call their home. This is their sanctuary. An abundance of first-generation compatible Jovian clone bodies, an industrial-scale clone fabrication facility, and source data for faster-than-light communications implants. The nano-adapted biotech behind the FTL communication implants is something the Quartermaster is very familiar with, and this is where the era of the Vanguard was born. The final part of the post by CCP goes into a lot of details about the different generation of clones and how Lifegiver had to work hard figuring out how to integrate the Infomorph imprints with the Jovian clone blanks. The first-gen Infomorphs, the ones that suffered from psychosis due to the use of retrofitted sleeper implants, were able to remain stable as long as they reside within the Fulcrum VR or virtuality. It is not made clear what makes the Fulcrum VR so special compared to other databanks in New Eden, other than just having been developed by the Jovians. Nevertheless, the virtuality offered a stable sanctuary to an otherwise troubled mind locked away in digital space. During this time, it was later discovered that both the soldier imprint and the sleeper imprint that conflicted within the minds of each first-gen Infomorph could be combined in a way that isolates and suppresses the psychotic nature of the sleeper imprints. This required creating an entirely new entity, an entirely new Infomorph. The second-generation Infomorphs, which did not have this problem, still needed to be carefully paired with the Jovian clone tech. This was done using carefully selected elements of sleeper data to avoid corruption of the Infomorph, while still preserving their memories. One can imagine how dangerous this procedure would be if not handled carefully, and it's not likely that Lifegiver would be in any position to suddenly find replacement Infomorphs of this type, especially considering what may have cost Mordu's Legion and Archcombine to be able to rescue and secure the imprints Lifegiver already has on hand. The post continues on with how the Infomorphs can link up with the Jovian clones that have been repurposed into Vanguard blanks. Using a front-end interface, the Infomorph that resides within the virtual world of the Fulcrum VR can directly link up to a Vanguard blank using faster-than-light communications. This results in the shifting of the imprint from the virtuality to the real world and back, while still having enough bandwidth to keep the Infomorph synced at both ends of the connection light years apart. Integrating Jovian FTL biotech with sleeper implants architecture is credited to the Quartermaster's ingenuity, but the Quartermaster likely isn't ever finished, as he has other projects in mind. What those other projects are and what they lead to, who knows but the Quartermaster. The final post then finishes with an explanation of the contracts and how they work in the context of Eve Vanguard. The Deathless Circle uses a third-party brokerage group that acts as a handler of the contracts. This is of course an oversimplification, since it is not known what the true goal for the Deathless is. The chaos in the front lines, quote, might very well be just a distraction from what they really have planned for New Eden. The Deathless is still a mysterious faction, and not much is known about them currently, other than having unfettered access to Jovian tech. Speaking of the Jovians, it's time I talk about them. In my previous videos, I mentioned there were 4 empires throughout New Eden: the Amar Empire, the Kaldari State, the Galente Federation, and the Mimitar Republic. But there used to be a fifth empire, once known as the Jove Directorate. They were known for having survived the cluster-wide societal collapse that followed the abrupt shutdown of the Stargate network throughout New Eden. The Jovians were able to advance their society centuries ahead of everyone else as a result. To go off on a tangent for a little bit, the Jovians were the ones that put the Amara Empire in their place after a battle that left them rather embarrassed, to put it mildly. It was at a time when the Amarians were on a conquest to expand their territories. While the Jovians were outnumbered and outgunned, they were extremely good at one very specific thing: information gathering. They knew a lot about the Amarians, more than the Amarians expected. The Jovians knew about their battle doctrines, their exact firepower, fleet composition, even the exact time and place of their deployments, and more. This information was exploited to the fullest extent by the Jovians. The battle happened at the system of Vakatioth, and it was a fleet of 100 Amarian battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and frigates, versus a smaller fleet of just one Jovian mothership and its accompanying group of cruisers and frigates spread out in groups of 5 each. The Jovians knew how to exploit the weaknesses inherent in the Amarian battle doctrine, as well as knowing the limitations of each ship involved. This one defeat suffered by the Amarians emboldened the Mimitar, who were held as slaves, to rebel against their Amarian masters. The second, larger assault planned by the Amarians against the Jovians had to be redirected towards quelling the slave uprising. Rumors to this day still circulate about the Galente Federation allegedly supplying the Mimitar slaves with weapons and ships long before the uprising. Regardless of what the rumors say, the Jovians forced the Amarians into a peace agreement. No one has attacked the Jovians since then. The Jove Directorate proved to be more than just technologically advanced. They were often seen as reserved and focused more on information gathering throughout the cluster, in addition to them being mysterious. One of the ways they kept close tabs on everyone was with the use of secret agents and cloaked listening outposts scattered throughout New Eden. They also took an active role in the formation of Concord, appropriately known as the Space Police, that is tasked with maintaining general stability within the core empires of New Eden, as the Jovians were careful with distributing some of their own tech, such as the capsule technology used by capsuleers today. They even established the Society of Conscious Thought, SOCT, which eventually changed its focus from intelligence gathering to education and science. The Society of Conscious Thought even provided education for non-Jovian students coming from the 4 empires. The education proved so valuable, even the elites or nobility from within Amar sent their children to be educated there. Yes, I am aware of the irony here, and I'm sure the Amarians knew that too. But the Jove Directorate had a major problem. The Jovians were so advanced, they had already been messing with their own genetic makeup. Visually, they looked anything but human. Because of the changes made to their own bodies and consequently their offspring, the Jovians suffered psychological issues. Most have been consumed by what can best be described as severe depression, apathy or lack of any emotion, sociopathy, psychopathy, and ultimately a coma resulting in death due to lack of wanting to eat or drink. This was known as the Jovian disease. Eventually, the numbers dwindled to the point where the Jove Directorate practically died off on their own in silence. Even with drones handling the maintenance, the upkeep of the outposts was too much as the number of available technicians continued to dwindle. In the end, all that remains of them are abandoned outposts, an entirely abandoned region of space that is difficult to access, and its secrets. And now, the Deathless has access to it. An entire region up for grabs, and the pirate factions seem poised to take full advantage of it. And that's it. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and as usual, fly safe. All right. So this is the end of the video. If you don't want to watch anymore, you can just stop right here. I'm going off script now. Earlier in the video, I said that I'm going to give my own opinion about the narrative in which CCP Games actually painted via the posts that they made on Discord. And again, the purpose of those posts was to basically give some backstory or lore behind how the Vanguard were created and what their effect will likely be moving forward for New Eden. Now, I already gave an explanation, a detailed explanation, based on what they said and how their chronicles and stuff like that are posted on their official website. But I'm gonna give my own personal take of this narrative. Now, I'm just gonna start this off by saying that there are people who are wondering if this is going to restrict the scope of the Vanguard. Are they going to be just strictly for the Deathless, or will they be able to have any agency moving on in the future? Because after all, the narrative, at least initially, implies that the Vanguard are independent mercenaries or freelancers, so to speak. That's exactly how they were labeled, freelancers. So, as freelancers, wouldn't you want to have the option of maybe trying out working for, I don't know, the Angel Cartel or the Dregaristas directly, rather than having to rely on the Deathless as an intermediary? Or what about if you want to fight for the Kaldari or the Amar? Or just by yourself, really. And so that's a major concern that players have mentioned. And so thankfully, though, CCP did announce that they've opened up the Q&A sessions. And so players, including me, have submitted our questions in regards to this on their Discord. And so once the questions have been submitted and CCP like base their selections on which question is more popular to answer, they'll then answer those in the Q&A session. And so as for my personal take on this, I mean, honestly, it does at least clear up some of like the details in regards to say like which factions are directly involved, and also it kind of answers one of the questions that was presented when I made the previous video about the Vanguard clone, about the clones, yeah, about the Vanguard blanks, the clones, because we weren't exactly sure what composes of like what the composition of the Vanguard clones were. It was speculated that the Vanguard clones were just basically a collection of different types of clones from first gen, second gen, or now including the Jovians. But it turns out that those clones are actually Jovian blanks. And so I wanted to introduce the Jovians in this video because they were the fifth race, or well, the fifth empire, really, because they all originally human, or were human, because they then tampered with their own genes. And so the description visually is that their skin color is like completely different and maybe like blackish eyes. So yeah, and unusually symmetrical faces. That's one of the traits about them. Like they had unusually symmetrical traces because they kept messing around with their genes. Now, the Jovians were basically, as I said, they've interacted with everybody, and so they were the perfect medium to introduce all of the other empires, like in pieces, in this video. In the previous video, I did go into further detail about each individual empire, but like I said, I neglected to bring up the Joves. And the Jovians were, again, they were in the center of it all. And so, in my opinion, the use of the Jovians to at least try to like explain. And this is one of those things. Like I feel like um, one point I want to emphasize is that I feel that CCP is not really restricting um, the scope of the Vanguard within Vanguard, but rather they're trying to explain how or why Vanguard is the way it is using the lore. It's kind of like trying to explain game mechanics, really. See what I mean? And so, honestly, I think I think they will eventually give us options to move to different factions. And they're probably going to be just adding more to the lore to try to justify that sudden change. Because again, for now, the narrative seems to be that we are freelancers, but currently we're kind of stuck with the Deathless. And another one question that was brought up though is, are the Vanguard really freelancers, or did they not have a choice? I mean, they were stuck in the databanks of New Eden before they were extracted by Mordu's Legion, Arcombine, along with Lifegiver. Oh, and by the way, if you're curious, um, Lifegiver wasn't like didn't really have a name given to her in the post. It just I'm guessing that's just a code name, so that no one would actually know who the real Lifegiver is. But all we know is her gender, she. As for the quartermaster again, like he's like I've actually seen a video or two of the quartermaster. I think CCP actually posted this years ago, really back when Valkyrie was announced. And so they were showing tidbits of like behind the scenes, like with the voice actors, and one of them was with an actor who voiced the quartermaster, and he had a pretty good voice too. It's like if you were to search up YouTube and look up Valkyrie echoes, you will probably hear like some tidbits or voices of the quartermaster. He has that really like he had that really mysterious voice going for him. It's kind of like the kind of voice where like you sense that you can trust this guy, but you have some doubts. So it's like you can't fully trust a guy, but you need him. And in some ways he needs you. And so there's that bit of like a like middle ground that the tone kind of strikes there, you know? But that's just my personal opinion. You might interpret it differently. So yeah. Oh, and if you're wondering, I did make some changes to this world. And let me take this out of focus, actually, so that you can see. So here you go. I created a holographic projection of the Warbarge, and each of those colored boxes that you see represents the location of each room. And I color coded them accordingly. And so all you have to do is just simply approach them and click on them, just like so. I may have to get closer because I'm short. Get over here. The Event Horizon Lounge, the War Room, the Minotaur Quarters, and so on. Oh, and this is the last room that I built. Honestly, I'm proud of this. It took me a while to bake the lights properly. And so, overall though, I think I may have hit the limit when it comes to light sources. Because when I baked the lights with mixed lighting, I couldn't actually get the lighting to work properly. It kept flickering in some parts, and so especially based on distance. And so for this room, unfortunately, I had to stick with just baked lights, nothing more. And that's it, though. Other than that, I added the virtual map where you just simply spawn in and click to go to it. So yeah, I hope you guys like this. Take care.